Hey everybody, this is Perch. In the past, I've done shows talking about the best way to get into comics, the best way to produce a comic, the best way to just get material going is to do it. You need to build up a body of work. This is the number one best piece of advice of anything. It goes before things like, get yourself an editor or figure out who your colorist is or any of that. Producing comics is goal number one. If you don't produce a body of work, if you don't get material out there, then you're going to be always stuck waiting at the gate. This is some advice that's been going around Facebook and some other places as people say, how do I break into comics? And it's the obvious, get things going. I appreciate. I got the weirdest mail. I'll post it up here if I remember, which I probably will not. But I'll just remove it. But anyway, writer, very very well-known writer, you know the name, says, "Hey, I watched your video on how to get into comics. Just begin." I did one about, I don't know, 3-4 months ago now, I think, with this advice. Like, really great advice. I can't link to your video because people would get upset, but great advice. And then yesterday he puts out the advice. I'm like, jerk. It's funny. Anyway, yes, the best thing to do is to get your comic published. Just start putting it out there. And you don't have to, again, don't go through a lot of steps. Don't make your first step getting an account at Diamond. Don't try and, I'm not going to get anything produced until I get a publisher to sign on to do it. Go the webcomics route. Go self-publishing. Go to Kablam. Go to places like that. For under $1,000, you can get your comic out there. It's important that you do that. Just figure out what your budget is. If your budget, by the way, is $100, then you're going to need to go the digital route. Get some of that put up. If your budget is, but you can get stuff done cheap. Yeah, that's true. You're not going to get 100,000 copy print run for $1,000, but you can get some copies of your comic. This is going to help. Proving that you can take things from start to finish is a big deal in comics. Absolutely, it's a big deal. However, because you knew there was a but coming, right? There's another section of advice where Alana Smith but then some other editors are writing about how basically confirming, yes, you need to get a body of work out there, but then rather than just leave it there, take it the one step further that is broken, I think, or at least makes it more laughable. And that's why I really want people to tune in, listen, appreciate, and accept what we started this video with. That is the best advice to you. If you want to get into comics, you need to produce some comics. Start producing them, put them anywhere you can, get that work out there, get that portfolio, get that content going. And if you want to be really fancy about it, be organized about what you're doing, okay? But that's not the end of the race. If you want to work at Marvel in particular, or DC, or any of the big publishers, if you want to work somewhere, it's not just producing comics, unfortunately, is not enough. Now, what people are saying, what these editors are saying is that, merit is all that matters. Merit, getting work out there, getting work produced, that's all that matters. That is not the case. I wish it was. It's a wonderful idea. It should be true that, the quality work shines through, and if you just produce work, that's cool. But no, that's not all there is to it. Unfortunately, who comes into play a lot. Nepotism comes into play a lot. Unfortunately, it is true. If you want to get into work with specific publishers and specific editors, then getting onto Twitter, kissing their ass, and basically, just being an ally, so to speak, is unfortunately key to the job. I don't feel like I'm revealing any big secret here, but for whatever reason, this is kind of a no-no in comics to just say it outright like this. The work matters. You definitely have to put some material out, but the reality of the job, the reality of the situation is, if you're not friends with the right people, if you haven't greased the right wheels, if you haven't done those things, then you're in trouble, or it's unlikely to happen for you. Unlikely does not mean impossible. There's still another route where you get really famous in another industry, or you get a reputation doing other things, or maybe you're friends with somebody who's friends with the editor. That's another way to do it. And by the way, I'm saying this stuff. Um, well, I'll get to that in a second. None of this is necessarily ugly. If you're listening to this and you're getting kind of steamed up, like, hey, I'm writing a comic for the big two, and that's not fair. I did it on merit. Yeah, I'm sure merit played into it. And I think, unfortunately, networking and some of these other things is part of the game. It is a fact. But we'll get there in a second. I'm just saying, you have to be practical about it. If your goal is to write at Marvel, and you believe your way to do that is to produce a couple comics and then go on angry rants against Marvel because you hate their current content, you're not going to get work there. It's not going to happen. They are going to block you as a troublemaker, as somebody who just can't play ball with the system. And by the way, just to be fair about it, I think 50% of that is right. Part of having a working relationship with anyone is that you have to be, at least somewhat agreeable. You can't be a lunatic that everybody hates to work with. That is part of it. So I don't think it's completely unreasonable for the criteria to get a job at these companies to be gets along with others. That's also life, right? But the other 50%, the other half of that is, it sets in motion a scenario where the people who are making these choices, i.e., in this case, the editors, they may behave like crazy people. They may have very strange methods of how they're selecting people or who they want to work with. And the criteria becomes less getting along with everyone or just being a good bloke to work with, and turns into gets along with this particular editor who may or may not be a crazy person. It changes from works well with everybody to works well with this personality. And that is a shame. Unfortunately, again, that is life. This is true of any industry you go into. There is networking, there is relational hiring, there is nepotism. It is true everywhere where you want to go. It's not all about merit. We want to make it sound like it's a happy, good. We want merit. Of course we all care about merit. Of course it's the work that shines through. Of course it's the work is the thing that we care about. Of course, because anything else would be crazy. Anything else sounds kind of ugly and gross. Anything else sounds like it's not a what it's not a what it's who kind of situation. And nobody wants to say that stuff out loud. But that is the way the world works. That is the way the system is built. And you can't go in there and just blow that system up. Now, I mentioned I'd come back to it. I think networking is one of those things that feels gross. And it's gross because you've seen probably lots of movies where some schlub comes in and basically, kind of brown noses in with the right people, and then they're kept in their job even though they're incompetent. That's pretty much the plot of all kinds of movies. Unfortunately, that is true. But it's. I feel like I'm going to be taken completely wrong in the comments on this one. I just networking when something is a fact of life. You can rail against it as much as you want, but it's not going to change the scenario. It's not going to change things. Maybe this is what it means to be a pragmatic. You can go and you can scream about it, and you can say it's wrong, and you can, be obnoxious, but in doing so, you are not going to get a job at that company. It's not ever going to happen for you. And if you're comfortable with that, cool. But I know many people who go out and shout and scream and get really angry about things and flame and go on videos and do all kinds of things where they're ripping these companies left and right. But quietly, in private, or maybe even public, I mean, some people do it there too, they will bemoan the fact that they can't get hired there. And you can't have it both ways. In a completely fair and wonderful world, it would just be about the work. But if that were true, John Byrne would probably be drawing X-Men right now. and that's just one example of many. I think this is part of the game, and game is the right word. A lot of this business, a lot of this stuff is a bit of a game, and it is frustrating. And that's why a lot of people in their different jobs opt out of the game and either start their own companies or go freelance or do what they do. I don't necessarily play well with others myself. So I mean I do okay. But I have an exhaustion point where I just, there comes to be a point where you just don't feel like kissing ass to somebody who you don't particularly respect, who you see, running a business into the ground. And when you hit that point, you can either keep pretending or make some changes. You say, you know what, I'm going to have to, I'm going to have to strike out on this on my own. But you can't sit in a place and simultaneously hate it and complain about it, and also get along and work well in it. It doesn't work. The two don't go together. The part that exhausts me about the whole situation is, um, everybody. If you search your heart, if you reach down deep inside, this is true. This is how business works. It's how work works. And I think the part that irks me about it is when somebody does go, online or whatever else and says, it's only about merit in this company. And you're like, oh, bullshit. I'm sorry. It's, it's not, it just comes off as so incredibly phony. And that's the part that irks me. It's like, hey, the world isn't perfect, not even close to it. But let's not sit around and pretend that everything is all hunky dory. I think this is my big complaint in many cases with comics. I think lumps me into quote unquote the wrong people, because I'm not satisfied. I've said this a million times. I'm not satisfied when I see a GoFundMe for Craig with parts of his body broken, and he doesn't have the money to go do it. And he's having to crowdfund the medical bills. And then simultaneously, we're hearing about how everything is absolutely perfect in the comic industry and it's wonderful, and the complainers are a bunch of complaining jerks and they should shut up. Those two worlds don't go together. I won't accept it. And, so if that puts me on the outs with people, so be it. I am not trying to get a job at Marvel. So, I am satisfied with my fate. But I just, this video is kind of the obvious. Yeah, you have to play ball. If you don't want to play ball, Marvel and DC are not for you. Many of the indies, look around at the people who are working there. If you look at the editorial group, if you look at the management, if you look at the other workers there, and it's a close-knit, kind of cliquey community that is ideologically the opposite of you're not going to get in there. Now, and so we'll put a point on it. Jim Lee doesn't fit with a lot of these indie groups. Does Jim Lee's personality fit with the management and leadership at Valiant? Probably not. Now, if Jim Lee came around and said, hey, I want to sign with you, I'm leaving DC, I'm going to be your artist, I'm going to put on a regular ongoing book at Valiant, they would take him. They would take him because he's a known entity, because they know he's going to sell hundreds of thousands of copies of books. And that would be good for them from a business standpoint. But if somebody who didn't have that history came around with the same skills, by the way, same portfolio as Jim Lee, stuff looked really, really great, but didn't have the background, didn't have the name, didn't have any of the stuff that Jim Lee has, just the skill, chances are they wouldn't get a job in that company. Not without getting along, not without being part of the group. I'll say it in a different way. If somebody is an active member of, say, the Comicsgate community, skills of Jim Lee, and tries to go get a job at Valiant, you're not getting hired there. It's not all about merit. It's about these other things too. Is that fair? No. Is it life? Yes. I don't know. Is this a big revelation video? I hate these ones where I get to the end of it. I'm like, I am talking about how water is wet for 10 minutes. People, I don't know. It creates some good discussion in the comments, so that part's good. But I mean, I always feel bad for you. I'm sorry. I feel like I should apologize to you after this kind of stuff. Anyway, hey, like and subscribe this nonsense. Thanks for listening.